So it's 4 o'clock, time to start. So let me just quickly have a look how many people are attending. Anyway, I think we'll start at this point. It's 4 o'clock. Welcome to our first online seminar in cooperation with Wine Intelligence. I'm very happy to have so many people that sign up for today's webinar, and hope you get a lot of relevant information that will help you in the next few years, months, whatever, to get a better picture of the US market. My name is Carola Keller. I'm in charge of the US market as a project manager here at the DWI. We are joined today by Wine Intelligence, and the representative today is Willem Lerner, who will show you the actual figures from last year. I think you all have received the document, and you will get some further insights from him. In the background, we have Tina from Wine Intelligence, who might be able to answer some of the questions in the chat room while we have this 1 hour of presentation. We start today at 4 p.m. due to the fact that we have a couple of friends from the US joining us. We're very excited to have Michael Osborne from Wine.com with us. He's founder and executive vice president of Wine.com, and we've been working with Wine.com very successfully in the last year. And then we have our US Wines of Germany team joining us, which is Steven Schmitz, Bruce Schneider, and Atalanta Rafferty. And before we start, I just want to give you a very brief overview of the US exports. So just to show you where we are, can you see my slides? Is anybody nodding? You can't see anything? You can see something, good. So our major export destinations are the US, Norway, and the Netherlands, as you can see, whereas, of course, the US is very far ahead of all the others. But due to the, as you can see, those are the figures for just 1 year. And we have been quite successful in the US, even so the numbers are declining. There is a number of reasons. One of them is probably the pandemics, I can't get the word, COVID, anyway. We have a decline. That's just the way it is. But in order to get some more details on the figures, I'll pass on to Wilhelm. Can you enter your file now?
You will have to stop, Carola, because otherwise I cannot share.
Got it now. So now it's passing on to Wilhelm for the Wine Intelligence figures, numbers.
Yep. So here we go. You should all be able to see my screen.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So good afternoon and good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to be here. I'm a representative for Wine Intelligence in Germany, 30 years with the sector, and happy that we have now launched this initiative to bring data and insights even better and closer to the participants. As everybody has gotten the information ahead of the webinar, I'd like to walk through fast because I think purpose is to discuss and answer your questions. What we're going to quickly revert on is from 3 reports: the US Wine Landscapes, which is our standard annual review of consumer data and insights on the US, the US Portraits, which is consumer segmentation, and then of course the continuous updates on consumer trends to reflect the COVID area. We're going to focus on 6 topics which we consider are important. The first 3 are primarily topics which are not new but continue to be important for the US, and the latter 3 are some insights and topics on the latest developments and evolutions due to COVID. First one is Grape variety continues to be a key source and choice cue for US consumers. Here you see the importance of choice cues for US consumers. As you can see, 75% consider grape variety important or very important, next to then wine that matches or complements food, a brand I'm aware of, wine style description, and recommendation by friends or family. But grape variety stays a major one. Top of the list of those that have been drunk by US consumers is international varieties like Chardonnay, Merlot, etc. Riesling is ranked 5 in the white varietals, which I think is good news for the German providers and producers, and Pinot Noir is ranked 3rd in the red varietals. A last quick look at our ZOLA, so Alternative Wine Opportunity Index. It kind of describes how important consumers consider the opportunity from an awareness, thought to purchase, affinity, and future purchase considerations. Organic, sustainability, and also environmentally friendly are 3 topic areas that continue to be top of the list in 2019 and continue so in the latest waves we've collected in 2020. Next one is probably rather a challenging one. US consumers are continuing to simplify their engagement with the traditions of wine. Why do we say that? If you look at the number of people that consider wine choice cues as important in a time span from 2017 to 2020, you will realize that all of these decline in their importance. So consumers are less aware of all of them, which is a trend which we see in all other markets as well. And if you look at our confidence and knowledge index, the confidence index stays fundamentally stable. I'll just try to get my pointer. It stays stable, whereas the knowledge index goes down. What does that mean? That means for all the brand owners and wineries that we need to find new ways to stay relevant for the wine drinkers in this context and find new ways to connect and touch. With this, I go to target groups. As we need to understand who is consuming wine, to understand what makes it relevant for them. Millennial drinkers have been and continue to be shifting the dynamics of wine in the US market. If you look at the number of wine drinkers overall, the number of those that drink wine at least once a year, drink wine at least once per year has been increasing from 215 to 220, from 110 to 118 million. Yet the number of regular wine drinkers, so those that drink wine at least once per month, has been decreasing from 88 million to 77 million. So we're seeing a smaller base. And in this smaller base, you see that the millennials, so those that are born 80 to 95, so that are 25 to 40, you see them here in the gray bar, see that they have been moving up and are those that drink wine most often, followed by the boomers, so those in my age, and then the generation X, the generation Z has declined again. So millennials continue to be those that drive the dynamics of the US market. If you look at wine involvement as another indicator for that, we see that those that are highly involved, the number of highly involved is much higher, between 21 and 34 and 35 to 54. So meaning involvement goes up in the younger groups, and those are also more experimental. So in a nutshell, it means we have consumers that are willing to test and try new things, which I think is good news for people and exporters that try out new concepts. The next encouraging fact in our data is that from the COVID crisis and the pandemic, wine is one of the beneficiaries despite all the restrictions. Overall, we see that the US consumers have an increasing lifestyle pessimism. The numbers, what we call halters and reducers, so those that are more inclined to reduce and simplify and be more cautious, is increasing towards a 50% share in August 2020, and those that want to treat themselves, hedonists and moderators, is decreasing. So overall, we have a skeptical US environment. This is less radical in other countries like, for instance, Germany or Europe. If we look at the net change in category and consumption, and this is data from our colleagues from IWSR, we see that if we take wine, hard seltzer, Tennessee whiskey, beer, and vodka, the net change in spend per unit is 10%. So there is an up in spending level, which is even higher for Tennessee whiskey, but vodka and wine is up. And the net change in consumption for wine is up as well by 12%, which is higher than beer and vodka in the US. Tennessee whiskey and hard seltzer is even higher, but wine is one of the beneficiaries of that. And if you look at the frequency of wine consumption over time, which is data from our consumer insights, you see that the US, and this is this orange bar here, at the peak, the consumption has increased up to 19%. As in many other countries, it's been declining again towards October 2020, but it still is, the number of consumption occasions is up by 6%. We realize in our data that not only the number of consumption occasions for wine has been going up, which is an encouraging trend, but also the occasions in which wine is used extend. You see here the changes for April 2020 and August 2020 versus the pre-pandemic behavior, and the US is the yellow arrows. We see that with an informal meal at home, the US has been increasing, which is one of the countries, in contrast to all of the others we're tracking in COVID behavior, has been positive. More importantly, and this is similar for most countries, except for Sweden, the usage occasion, a relaxing drink at the end of the day at home, has been increasing in the US, second highest next only to China. This also is true, for instance, for a new occasion we're testing, having a drink while you are telephoning or communicating with friends. We believe that this is an interesting development, especially for wines of Germany, because the wines we provide typically are more relevant and applicable for food, of course, but even more so for non-food occasions. So this may provide an opportunity to kind of use this trend. And if we look at the wine buying channel usage, we see that a lot of the alternative channels are increasingly leave their mark. Online retailer and wine.com will certainly talk more about that, is at 10% usage. Wine Club is 10%, which is up, and it's the only channel that we tracked for longer over time. Also wineries websites, supermarket websites, and delivery apps. This is a trend we see in all other countries we're tracking similarly. And the big question, of course, is will that retain after COVID and pandemic situation or not? My personal opinion, and this is looking in the glass bowl, of course, but I believe that from focus group discussions we've had in many countries, we see that people probably will partially go back to old behavior, but also will retain some of this new behavior they've learned, especially in purchasing, and especially there where it is convenient to them. Last consumer insight we'd like to highlight is a shift to localism. In a situation of turmoil like the pandemic, consumers and US consumers are not an exception to that. Turn to value, safety, and comfort. They turn back to things they are known and comfortable with. Here you see the net change score. So those that say they buy more from a country of origin and those that say they buy less. And you see that US wines with origin California and other US both have the highest share up. All the other countries of origin have a negative net change score, meaning in total, consumers respond that they will buy less from these countries. This is true for New World in a similar magnitude than Old World countries, meaning that at the end, as an export country, we have to do an extra effort, staying relevant and staying close, despite the fact not being able to travel and go there. In a nutshell, what is an advantage potentially in our home market in Germany, where we see the same trend for German wines in Germany, it's a slight challenge for a US context. So if I kind of sum up, we see the first three trends. Grape varieties continue to be a key choice cue, a simplifying engagement, and millennial drinkers shifting the dynamics as things that continue to be, despite COVID, underlying forces that drive the behavior in the US. Two positive aspects we highlighted for wine, and I believe also for German wine in the US, is that wine is overall a beneficiary, and we have usage occasions and as well as channels that give new opportunities for positioning wines, and especially wines of Germany, and certainly then a challenge for all of us that are exporting to kind of stay relevant and close in an environment where clearly US offerings are favored at the moment. With that, I'd like to stop. So we're 18 minutes because I wanted to be short and concise. And if there are any probably topics from the chat room, Tina, we could probably address them right here.
No questions yet.
No questions yet. Good. Then, Carola, I think I would hand back over to you.
Yes, thank you, William. That was very interesting. So as William said, if anybody's still got some questions in regard to the presentation he just did, do feel free to use the chat room and we're happy to answer your questions. As this is not the case at the moment, we'll pass on to Michael Osborne from wine.com, who will give us hopefully some insights on how the US market on the online retail side is going.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And that was good insights for the broader market of the US. I won't have much to comment about the entire market as William has shared, but rather what we see from our vantage point, which is e-commerce. And in covering the United States, we service 42 states plus Washington, D.C. And we certainly have seen the impact of essentially knowledge amongst consumers that purchasing wine online was permissible, and we certainly had some awareness opportunities during the year. So that's what I want to comment on, and I'll also share out more specifically what we saw from Wines of Germany. Just a little insight into what the metrics of the business look like. If I were here presenting 1 year ago, we would have been talking about a business that had just finished doing $165 million in revenue through the end of our fiscal year in March. But with the pandemic and the tailwinds that the knowledge of buying wine online became quite relevant to the States, you can see now through the end of last month, we're nearly a $350 million business. This was a trend that had been going on for many years. We had growth between 15 and 25% as a CAGR for 10 years. It's what we've done here is just taken and pulled forward growth that was going to happen with respect to e-commerce and pulled ahead a year or two of growth into this number. The number of new consumers who found us, we now service nearly 700,000 customers. And the most important of those customers are what we call our stewardship members. They join our $49 a year free shipping program. So you pay $49 and shipping is then off the table for the full year. And in that adoption, obviously also accelerated during the pandemic. Most interesting thing here that we have found to be important and interesting to point out is the fact that the revenue per customer has actually been accretive with these new consumers joining us. You could have thought going in that if you added this many new customers to the business, that perhaps it would influence the value of all of the consumers, and in fact that didn't happen. One point I'll make here while showing you this active customer base is of the new customers. Just William's presentation made me remember this fact that would be important to you. Of the new customers who joined us in 2020, 44% of them are millennials or younger. So legal drinking age to the millennial generation. That is a big chunk of our new customers. And when we survey them, we've learned that they have found what we have agreed to be a better way to buy wine. I want to just give you a little background into why we exist. If you're not familiar with our business, we exist because this problem exists at retail. The wall of wine, and it's difficult for consumers. Traditional retailers have limited shelf space because of real estate constraints, and so the wall of wine is typically 500 to 600 wines in any one venue. At wine.com, we offer to our markets in New York and California and much of the U.S. between 10 to 15,000 different wines at a time. And over the course of a year, we've sold more than 50,000 different vintage-specific wines. The other issue is just information. A consumer is perplexed because you can only glean so much from that front label or the back label. And obviously, e-commerce, table stakes at e-commerce is content. It's information about the wine, the people who made it, the grape that went into it, the region it's from, all the stories that you tell and we amplify. It starts then with, for our case, the world's largest wine store, and that's again at 51,000 wines. Arguably, we've got the biggest selection in the country, but that may not be enough when it comes to the opportunity that you want to buy and enjoy maybe only a few bottles tonight. So obviously, searching and sorting and filtering that selection, whether it's by popularity, whether it's by vintage, region, varietal, popular professional ratings. These are all opportunities that we have. And then we also apply our own our own subjective characteristics around most interesting, we call it, and the ability to sort and search by attributes that we feel are important to make a wine interesting. In this example here, I might come up with a California Cabernet from Paso Robles, rated 94 points, under $40. These are things that are just impossible to do at traditional retail stores. We then show an example. I've chosen a California winery here just so I didn't offend any of you and picked on any of your products. But this example of the content. So we obviously work directly with our winery partners, including most of you, to get a carousel of images that can be enhanced, videos where possible, maps, and amplify your stories. And then, of course, help consumers find wine that are similar to the wine through our recommendations engine. And when that's not enough, we have a whole staff of live chat sommeliers like Macy here, who are standing by to answer wine questions. This is not customer service. These are pre-sale sommeliers, if you will, that are capable of answering any number of wine questions from the most basic to the most extraordinary and guide customers towards a great bottle of wine. Just a little more on the business model. If you're not familiar, we are retailers, which is to say we don't import or cause to be imported any wine. That's not permissible at the retail tier in the US. So we are customers of your importers and of your wholesalers. Last year, a little more than 51,000 wines came from 8,000 wineries into our 6 fulfillment centers, and those 6 centers are close to our customers too. So these 700,000 consumers receive their wine within, on average, in 1.7 days. Half of our customers get their wine ordered today, tomorrow. The result of our business being predicated on the 3-tier system where we are customers of wholesalers give us a chance to hold inventory much lighter than traditional retail would in other categories. Our inventory is less than 30 days on hand. Now I think I'll share with you some things that distinguish our customer behavior from that of the US industry as a whole, and information that would be, I imagine, delightful for German wines in your industry. The Nielsen IQ numbers, that's the new name for Nielsen's business in the States, where they measure performance of categories, including wine, beer, and spirits, on other, obviously, hard good categories as well. But the beverage alcohol team updated this for me just last week. And it's important to note that in the broad US market, 32% of wine that's sold is imported wine. The majority, 69%, is domestic. Whereas for years, imports have been more important to wine.com than domestic. Actually, it gained a point this past year. It was 51% compared to 49 for about 5 years in a row. And last year, imports even took another step forward. I think it's a large part into making them available for consumers. So many retailers in the States create a gatekeeper mentality where they are making that assortment available and reducing the opportunities. If you go to a traditional retailer in the States, you will not find 300 choices from Germany. You will find 1 or 2 or 3 on a shelf. Another difference between wine.com and the broad U.S. market, now the wine.com on the left here, U.S. market on the right, is that our customers largely prefer red wine. And I show this because it's important to note, given the fact that so much of our business with Germany is white wine. You don't export enough if you're a world-class Pinot Noir to us yet, which we'll wait for. But just a little example here of how dominant red wine is over white, and I think we probably are very consistent with sparkling wine. And now getting to imports and their growth rates. If the average growth rate last year at wine.com, given the numbers I showed you, you need to know where the line is drawn, and that's drawn at growth rates at 120%, would be that a region kept pace. Anything less than 120% means that region lost share to another. The chart itself, the height of it, there is the relative size. And it won't surprise you, and this is in revenue, so it won't surprise you that France and Italy certainly outpace other regions of Europe. But I want to point out here, obviously key is that the growth of German wines within wine.com at 210% was only second to that of New Zealand from any region. Last year, our consumers bought 87,000 bottles of German wine, a little more than $1.5 million in revenue from Germany. And that was on 35,000 consumer orders. So we know obviously a great deal about these consumers, and it's one of the collaborations that we perform with Wines of Germany annually. A little pie chart here to give you the average selling price of wines from Germany on wine.com. It's largely Riesling, as you might be aware, and the average selling price is less than our company's average, which is $28 on still wine. So I did want to call out that piece of it. So much of our white business would be lower average selling price, and certainly Riesling. Riesling making up 85% of our business. So I thought that would be a chance to drill down on just Riesling as a category and its growth from all regions of 173% last year. And Germany represents 50% of that number. And you can see the regions that then fall in line afterwards. Washington State, which is, I think in one respect, largely one of our most successful Washington State wines, is a collaboration with Ernie Lucen. So Dr. Lucen's Oroca Riesling is quite popular with our customers. That's from Washington State, but then again, France, Australia, and then the California and New York markets follow. Lastly, I just want to point out that working with the team in the U.S. for Wines of Germany, we've had an opportunity to probably push the German wines in a way that hadn't been done in years past. We did a lot of collaboration this year, from email campaigns to promotional banners on our website, social media, not only supported by our team, but also by the publicists and relationship managers for Wines of Germany. And all of these drive towards our selection of the German wine assortment. And that is yet probably another reason why your growth was 210% last year. So allow me to pause there in case there might be questions about our business or from the team from Wines of Germany.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
I'm not seeing any questions.
Who was that? Bruce?
That was just, I just was saying, I'm not seeing any questions from the chat, so I just was monitoring that. But
okay, as you're on already, and Michael gave you a good start to show what we've done last year. Maybe you want to take over?
Yes, fantastic.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yep, great to be with you. We're just going to give a brief overview of the strategy for the Wines of Germany program in the US, and also an overview of our key activities in the program. In terms of strategy, I know there was mention in the wine.com program about Riesling. For many years, we focused on different styles of Riesling. In more recent years, we've started to showcase a broad range of grape varieties and wine styles from Germany that resonate with US consumer tastes. So now including red wine, Pinot Noir, the white Pinot varieties, Sect, Rosé, gives us a much broader palette to talk about. We lean on partnerships with strategic retailers to expand the availability and offerings of German wines. Prioritize consumer engagements via trial, traditional and social media, and strategic digital activations, which we'll give some more information on. We continue to engage key trade via digital activations, seminars, and educational opportunities. And we make good use of our brand ambassadors to expand our program's reach and drive engagement and brand love with key audiences. That used to be just in primary markets, but we're doing a lot more work in secondary markets as well in recent years, and it's been very effective. We drive recommendations of German wines through media, social media, trade, and consumer activations. So that's a summary of our strategy for the US market. In terms of the program and the major categories of activities, we have an ongoing information bureau to help educators, influencers, media field any questions and provide information that they need. Media relations continues to be an important part of our program. We have a robust digital and social campaign that has taken on more and more importance in recent years. Press trips and trade trips are usually a main portion of the program. Obviously, since the start of COVID 2020, press and trade trips were non-existent. We are not doing them currently. We may look as COVID evolves at the latter part of this year, but certainly by the beginning of 2022, we expect to be back to a robust press and trade trip program. We do off-premise promotions, which involves trial and tastings, which are key and for consumer tasting and trial. We do consumer and trade events. And our image campaign involves advertising and other outlets. And finally, our ambassador program is a key part of our overall program, especially in the on-premise. I'm going to turn it over to Stephen now to talk a little bit more about the program.
Yeah, so as Bruce mentioned, that is the sort of contours of the larger program. We wanted to drill down into two specific areas of our program that I think really get to the heart of the data presented by Wine Intelligence and the real world application of that data that Michael presented from wine.com. So one of the first areas of our program that we wanted to talk about was digital and social media. And, digital and social media was always critical to the success of the wine industry and of individual wineries. And that is even more so in this era of pandemics and COVID. It provides the best platform to really engage with consumers on a direct level. We get to dictate our messaging, what we're talking about, the assets that we're sharing with them. And we really think it's critical to the success of the overall program. I think one of the challenges that we've seen always, and this is not specific to necessarily German producers or German wineries, is the wine industry has always lagged a little bit behind other consumer product goods industries in how they talk to consumers, I think progressively and online. One of the reasons why we wanted to bring Michael from wine.com here today is because I think they really do a really good job of breaking down some of the barriers of the wine industry that have been put in place and that really keep you, the producer, away from your end consumer in the US. Social media and your digital suite is exactly the type of tool that you can use to engage with them directly. And we do the same thing around the German wine industry at large and the category itself. The second area that we wanted to focus on today was our off-premise retail promotions. We have always partnered with various retailers in the US, but this has become probably the most important part of our program in the last year or so. I know, as Willem had presented earlier in the Wine Intelligence slides about how consumers are purchasing their wines, we've seen this incredible shift, and I know you have in Germany as well, of consumers really looking to trusted retailers and or online retailers to really purchase their wines. They're not going out to bars or restaurants, and so they're looking to enjoy those wines at home. And so we feel that this is the most successful way to reach a broad community of US wine drinkers. Our partnerships range between our national partnership with wine.com, some individual partnerships with key regional chains, the two here being Fine Wine and Good Spirits, which is the wine shop of the state of Pennsylvania. So they have 400 wine shops across the state of Pennsylvania, as well as Binny's, which is a Illinois-based family-owned wine retailer with 45 wine shops across the state of Illinois. And at each one of these with each one of these partners, we don't dictate the partnership. We really create a custom partnership that fits them and their needs, because we want to insert ourselves seamlessly into the good work that they're already doing, and be a part of the conversation with their customers. We also, as Michael mentioned, we also support these partnerships on our end from the Wines of Germany side, through social media, geo-targeted advertising, influencer partnerships, media relations. We want to be a partner to each one of our retail partners and help them not only sell more German wine to the customers that are coming in their door or clicking onto their website, but help them expand their universe of customers, maybe some locals who love German wine, and bringing them in and really supporting them that way. So I think the data that we saw, these two elements more than anything else really support both the wine intelligence data that was presented earlier, as well as the real world application that Michael presented to us from wine.com. With that, I think that is the end of our presentation. I'll turn it over to Carola and see if there are any questions.
Well, we do have, thank you, Stephen. We do have a couple of questions. One was for Michael Osborne. There was a question, I think it was from Alex, not quite sure. What is the average winery size delivering to wine.com?
What is the
average winery size?
The average winery size. We work with producers that are quite small. For us, it isn't the size; it's whether or not they have a distributor, a wholesaler, stocking the wines in a local market. Again, the U.S. laws are very peculiar, and they're leftovers from 1933 when we repealed prohibition here. So I like the idea that we repealed prohibition, but there are some very strict laws. As a retailer, we buy from local wholesalers in each of the 6 states where we have a presence. If a producer has wine at those wholesalers likely have a sales representative or a management team who's calling on our account. And we otherwise have really no gatekeeper mentality at all, which is how you get to having more than 50,000 different wines being purchased from us. They come into our warehouse and onto a consumer. So I would like to think that we're open to the universe of wines as long as they're already in the States.
Okay, thank you. I think that was a good answer. We have got a couple of questions from Philip. Let me see. What would you say is the largest barrier of entry when selling wines to the US? I think that goes to the whole team of our US partners.
I can start with this one. I think the largest barrier of entry is exactly what Michael just mentioned. It is the arcane wine laws of the US, in that we are not one wine market, we are 51 wine markets. And that is a real challenge for small and medium-sized producers all around the world that are not American. And so I would say that is absolutely number one. Unfortunately, I don't see that changing anytime soon. So, what would maybe the second one be? The second one right now is those tariffs. I think Germany and France are at a disadvantage with competing with those 25% tariffs. We are hopeful that those will be going away with the new administration and the new trade representative, but we don't foresee those going away until August of this year at the earliest. So that will be a problem that stays with us at least for the short term.
Okay, we've got another.
And just that last question on, last part of that question about made in Germany, if that would apply to the U.S. market. I think it's important to understand that there is a general push towards discovery. Consumers are looking for new origins, and that is an advantage. And we do promote the made in Germany aspect, and I do think it can be an asset for sure.
Okay, then the next question is probably going with the same line. What are the positives and negatives that a typical US consumer has with regard to German wines? Are there any prejudice or anything against German wines? Or as you just said, you know, it's being experimental nowadays?
I would say it's generational. Oh, go ahead, Bruce.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, we used to suffer with things like sweet styles and so forth, and the younger consumers that are driving the market today, they don't have any of those preconceived notions. So we're in a much better position. There aren't those negative stereotypes in Germany, and they're certainly not, you know, they just don't exist to the degree they did, you know, years ago.
Stephen?
Yeah, I would. The only thing I would add to that it's both a positive and to Bruce's point, it's both a positive and a negative, right? I think there's a younger generation who wants to discover and who maybe is not aware always of the totality of Germany's wine offerings. I think especially beyond Riesling. And so that is one of the areas where we feel that there's a real opportunity for our campaign to go in there, build that consumer awareness, provide that education, so that when they do go on wine.com, instead of buying a bottle of Oregon Pinot or New Zealand Pinot, they're buying a bottle of German Pinot, or pick your poison on that. So.
Yeah, and if I reflect from the Wine Intelligence side, I just quickly looked, we have a 10% consumer base that has purchased German wines. If you compare that with Italy, which is around the 30s, or France, which is around 28, we are still, you know, not a mainstream type of consumer base. So I think, you know, it is kind of moving up against that ladder is probably another challenge we're having. But the more people that export, and Michael, I'm very encouraged that, you know, we're breaking down all barriers and get exposed to the product. I think that would clearly help, you know, moving up that ladder.
Okay. We've got a question to Michael again. Somebody wants to know if the ratings, for instance, from Parker Points or Wine Enthusiasts, are a key point to be better seen at wine.com.
You know, I think that they certainly do not hurt at all. Obviously, critical acclaim is we treat it like other retailers would, as a shelf talker and a point of reference. I think that you know, so I would encourage producers to you know, submit their wines to press in the UK. Decanter we cite as well as an example. I would tell you that one probably doesn't have a lift over another anymore. It's just critical acclaim, whether it's you know, one journalist or another. I'm not certain if our customers would pick them out, you know, to know the differences. But and the other thing I would highlight also, which has been a growing part of our business, is consumer ratings, and we allow them on a 5-star basis, but half points in between, so a 10-point scale to weigh in themselves, and that's a great flywheel. And part of the reason why it's easy is that on our app on the phone, that app is always near your glass, much more accessible than your computer might be, and there's a lot of interaction. So in addition to the critical acclaim, we find, you know, if you will, the consumer ratings also to play a larger and larger role.
Yeah, Carol, I would second what Michael said. I think that 20 years ago, Wine Spectator and Parker and those sort of people were absolutely the gatekeepers, and their palettes were golden. I think they are less important than they ever were with the sort of democratization of wine. I would say, however, that there is still value to submitting your you know, German wines to be scored by those producers. I would say doubly so if your focus market is the grocery channel. The grocery buyers are almost exclusively looking for 90-point scores from Wine Spectator, Wine Enthusiasts that they can slap on a bottle of $15 to $20 wine, and it'll go like hotcakes. And that's just the nature of that in the grocery channel. They don't have the wine steward or wine knowledgeable person on staff to guide the thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are going to grocery shop and maybe throw a bottle of wine in their cart, and so are looking for a simple cue to point consumers to. So I would say if grocery is an important channel for you, then it's doubly important. But to Michael's point, it's less, the scores are less and less important than they ever have been.
Okay, but those would be just the ratings from the US. So if we have the Gourmet from Germany, that would not be of interest to anybody.
Correct. So Wine Spectator, Wine Enthusiast, Wine Advocate, maybe Suckling, Wine and Spirit. Yeah.
Okay. One general question, I think, yes. Somebody wants to sell wines to the US, not having an importer. That's not possible, right?
You do need an importer. Yes, to enter the market, you do need a US importer, or multiple, depending.
Nope. I don't see any more questions at this point.
I think there is one more interesting one, which I think would be good to have a reflection on Michael and the US team. Do the millennials who are driving the wine market prefer high-end wines or more lifestyle market positionings?
Ah, okay.
Well, I just want to say something about young consumers. There might be a misconception that young consumers would be buying value-priced wines. So when we look at our average selling price, and again, in 2020, it was $28 on wine, $49 on spirits. Our highest ASP customer, average selling price per bottle, customers are the youngest consumers. The oldest consumers have the lowest average selling price. Now, these aren't huge swings, but they do range from a millennial or Gen X at $31 a bottle to a boomer at $29 and an older than boomer consumer at $26. Baby boomers, so the parents, if you will, of millennials, generally buy more bottles per order. They probably are the ones with the cellar. They have somewhere to put it. The younger consumers might have a wine rack in their apartment today, or their home doesn't have that finished cellar yet, but it hopefully would in another 10 years. But that's the only behavior we see. I would never suggest anyone dumb it down for a consumer. Millennial consumers, we find, are interested in authenticity and in real stories, so that that is the storytelling you can tell. We're not a good vibe when it comes to somebody who's creating a concoction to be imported or to be sold to a millennial. That doesn't work. That doesn't work with our customers.
Okay.
Bruce, Stephen, any reflections?
I would second that. I think that I wouldn't necessarily define the two as lifestyle or kind of a luxury product, right? Like they can be, to Michael's point, they can be both. I would say tell your story, talk authentically to that sort of millennial consumer base, no matter the price point, right? You could be selling them a $10 bottle at $15, $20 on up, right? But I don't think that they're necessarily exclusive. But I think you have to present the wine and present it in a way that's smart. You've got to talk to them how they expect to be talked to. You have to market to them on digital channels. I think those things are more important than the price of the bottle.
Yeah, probably I add one comment, which I think is very important, which you just mentioned, Stephen. I think given, even in a context of more local, I think digital and digital connection, which are not, necessarily a physical connection, provide, especially for that target group, an incredible opportunity to connect and create connections and stay connected, because they're willing to, and we see that in our data, to use and leverage those. So in that sense, I think there is more ability today also for smaller, and I have colleagues here where I live in the Rheingau that that do that frequently and have consumers online. So I think it's easier to connect and transfer messages these days.
Absolutely.
Okay, I don't see any further questions in our chat. Just to let you know, Wine Intelligence has quite a number of extracts for various markets. So if you're interested in those, do feel free to get in contact with us. We'll pass on your request to Eva Abele, who is in charge of these extracts. We have recorded this session, this webinar, and we will pass it on to everybody who's registered today. And for those who are interested in the US market, who have not entered the market yet, we have a Sprechtag next week on the 4th of March. So if you still want to register, feel free to do so. Apart from that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thanks to our guest speakers. Thank you for joining us, giving us your time and some insights into the US markets. Very interesting for all participants. If you have any further questions or need information from us, do feel free to get in contact with myself, Katja, or the US office directly. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.